DC animated films and shows are the bedrock of this entire fandom, and I can bet that at least one project is your favorite. Whether it's Batman the animated series from the 90s, the Justice League series from the 2000s, or even the previous DC animated movie universe from the 2010s, there's just about a project for everyone. So, what the f happened to the TomorrowVerse?
Those movies are terrible.
Hi, I'm your host Rob, and on this episode of Atomic Vision, I'm investigating the death of the TomorrowVerse. And the only way to figure out who the culprit is by starting from the beginning. After making 17 successful direct-to-video movies, in 2013, Justice League: The Flashpoint Paradox released and radically changed the future of DC's direct-to-video content forever. Back in the day, a lot of these older animated DC films were all standalone and self-contained stories that featured a revolving door of talent who would voice these characters for just one film, and that's it. But with Flashpoint, DC was making it clear that this is the beginning of a whole new connective cinematic universe, akin to the DCEU and MCU. This journey spanned over several solo films for Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, spin-offs featuring Constantine and the Suicide Squad, and then multiple Justice League crossover films. After 7 years, the DCAMU met its end with Justice League Dark: Apocalypse War. And at the end of that film, in a shocking turn of events, the Justice League loses, humanity is wiped out, and Barry is tasked with rebooting the timeline again. Although it was a bittersweet finale to go out on, it wasn't exactly a true ending either. With 16 films over 7 years, this is only half of the story because DC's ultimate plan for their animated movie universe was a purposeful reboot in the middle. Their overarching narrative would sneakily tie both storylines together, thereby creating one of the most ambitious projects in DC history. Thus, the TomorrowVerse was born. Only to die 4 years later. Despite starting off strong with Superman, Justice Society, and Batman: The Long Halloween, this universe would quickly fall apart, and each film that followed declined in quality till there was no point of return. Green Lantern: Beware My Power is just as, if not worse than the Ryan Reynolds Green Lantern film.
You're welcome, Canada.
And Justice League Warworld is a structured mess with an awful cliffhanger. But the whole reason I made this video is thanks to how terrible the Crisis on Infinite Earths trilogy wrapped up the TomorrowVerse. It's filled with useless cameos, a scattershot story structure that is all over the place, and ultimately the TomorrowVerse ends with yet another timeline wipe where nothing even mattered. It really feels like DC is once again flinging shit around hoping something would stick. So for what feels like the millionth time, DC's plans hit a snag and their 10th film story arc plan shrank down to 7 films. So what the f happened?
Cut the bullshit. I want to know who's the supplier.
We don't know. That's why there's a question mark on his face. That's not the way his face looks. That's just a question mark.
To solve this unexpected murder, we need to go down the usual suspects. And in this case, we only have 3 to choose from. The first suspect is that the team behind the TomorrowVerse had this ending planned from the beginning. If we're going to come across this from all angles, then this is somewhat plausible, but the issue is that it doesn't fully make any sense. The original plan was for 10 films, and in the end, we only got 7. And yes, I know that The Long Halloween was a 2-parter, and Crisis was a 3-parter, so technically this is 10. But I'm going to count these as single films because they feature the same writers, directors, and are sold as complete films on Blu-ray and VOD. I know it's all semantics, but the original DCAMU only featured this type of story structure once. And even with the death of Superman and the reign of the Supermen, those films played more like sequels than your traditional 2-parter. Plus, this wouldn't even explain the sudden shift toward Crisis when the first few films had 0 hints toward this finale. So, what if the TomorrowVerse team changed their mind? Well, that seems possible, but the problem with this theory is that making movies on this kind of scale isn't a simple yes or no decision they can freely make. Animation takes a long time to create, and based on what I've already deduced, this theory doesn't really hold any weight to it. And speaking of corporate, considering Warner Brothers has gone through hell and back thanks to this disastrous merger with Discovery, our next suspect is a beloved film director turned CEO who is now in charge of every DC project for the foreseeable future. Did James Gunn kill the TomorrowVerse?
So as many of you know, DC has been disconnected in film and television for a long time.
Now this makes the most sense because before Gunn and Safran took the job to be DC's CEOs, the studio wasn't exactly being led by anyone else. Warner Brothers has always run DC like it was just another cog in the machine at the studio, and unlike Marvel Studios at Disney, Warner was always the one calling the shots for every DC film and show. And to make matters even worse, since Warner's CEOs kept switching with each and every merger, plans at DC would change constantly, and nothing would ever really stick. But with Gunn and Safran as the new CEOs of DC Studios, we're finally going to get frequent projects, and Warner's constant shakeups won't affect DC's pipeline anymore. As of this video, we are at the tail end of Warner's reign over DC, as Joker Folie à Deux is set to be the last DC film solely made by Warner. After that film releases later this year, DC Studios will be the sole creator behind every DC project from here on out. So that begs the question, did Gunn kill the Tomorrowverse to make way for his new DCU? Logically, this would make the most sense, but the answer is surprisingly no. I know the internet has become a cesspool of angry mobs looking to blame any figurehead, and since Gunn and Safran took the job to run DC, they have gotten the most hate over nothing. Even then, the timeline just doesn't make any sense, as Gunn and Safran took the DC job at the end of 2022, and by then, these Tomorrowverse films were already in production, so it would be impossible for them to have intervened at all. Like I said before, animation takes a long time to make.
You ever notice that sometimes whoever's speaking has their mouth off camera so you never see their lips moving?
I noticed that.
Yeah, or we'll cut to the back of someone's head while they're talking for the same reason.
Not to mention Gunn and Safran are insanely busy. Right now they are currently working on Creature Commandos, Superman, Peacemaker Season 2, Supergirl, Lanterns, a Blue Beetle animated series, a Booster Gold series, and of course, they're helping Matt Reeves with the Batman Part 2. So there is literally no time for them to have sabotaged the DCAMU.
And then I'll give you a little bit of wham, bam, boom.
All right, that's enough.
Come on, girly.
So this leads us to our last suspect, who is, of course, the master culprit behind this entire debacle. If you haven't been paying attention, the answer has been right in front of you, and if you look back at history, the killer behind the Tomorrowverse is the same one behind the death of every major DC project since the company's inception. The killer is Warner Brothers.
It's so dumb.
It's so dumb, it's brilliant.
No! It's just dumb.
If it isn't obvious, Warner Brothers is in total disarray thanks to the horrible mismanagement of Discovery, and even in the past, they have consistently meddled with DC projects since the dawn of the studio. Whether it was Superman 2 with Richard Donner, the falling out with Tim Burton over Batman 3, which gave us the Schumacher films.
What killed the dinosaurs? The Ice Age!
And then the iconically disastrous run of the DCEU. Warner literally cannot be trusted with themselves. I mean, in 2 years, Warner killed David Ayer's Suicide Squad, butchered Justice League, and then gave us Justice League.
Dostoevsky.
And to tie this up with an awful bow, at the end of the DCEU, they meddled with The Flash a billion times before it even hit theaters. The killer has always been the one calling the shots. Remember when I said the creatives behind the Tomorrowverse had a planned 10-film arc for this new universe? Well, as it turns out, halfway through production, the higher-ups at Warner called and then ordered the Tomorrowverse to end with Crisis on Infinite Earths. The team behind the Tomorrowverse was not building up to this ending at all, and none of the previous films had any hints about this story. But because Warner is addicted to meddling, the last place to self-sabotage was the DCAMU. Butch Lukic, who's the co-creator of the Tomorrowverse, was interviewed by Cinemablend about the Tomorrowverse's ending, and in that article, he admits that Crisis on Infinite Earths was not in their plans at all. Quote, "It was 5 to 6 years where we laid out our 10 films that we were gonna do, because we were basically given 10 films only, and then you're out, you're done. Originally, me and Jim had a 10-movie arc that really didn't have Crisis, but then several executives from Warner Brothers Animation wanted Crisis to be the finality. So reluctantly, I said, okay, what else can I do about it? We'll do it, and hopefully, we just never get to it." I was hoping to get out of there before then. To make things even crazier, while making Crisis on Infinite Earths, the team behind the TomorrowVerse wasn't even aware that the CW was already making its own version of Crisis. So Warner had two teams making the same story, while The Flash was also doing multiverse shenanigans in theaters. Warner, what the f are you doing? As always, the death of yet another DC universe fell upon Warner executives speedrunning to catch up to their competitors. And now that the TomorrowVerse is over, the bigger question is, was it worth it? The TomorrowVerse always had an uphill battle, as the previous DCAMU is beloved by many. I personally found it hit or miss, but at 16 films, there was enough variety where you'd get hit after hit. The death of Superman is probably the best depiction of this iconic storyline so far in film. And although Apocalypse War was extremely controversial, it at least felt like an interesting way to end a universe. With the TomorrowVerse, it never felt like it had a specific plan in mind. And because Warner meddled and forced a Crisis finale at the last second, it kinda makes the previous films feel useless. But what do you think? Did you like the Crisis on Infinite Earths trilogy? Are you a fan of the TomorrowVerse and wished it kept going? Or are you glad this nightmare is finally over? Let me know in the comments down below. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this episode of Atomic Vision, leave a like, subscribe for more, and I'll see you next time.
Oh, bollocks is my ex.
You and Harley? Gross.
Do I look mad?
How about we do that move you taught me last weekend?
Now? I admire your boldness, but what will the team think?
What?